The trouble began on a quiet morning when no one expected anything to go wrong. The sun was still low, the studio lights were warming up, and the entire crew believed it would be a normal shooting day. But before the cameras could even roll, a silent wave of panic began to spread across the set. No one said anything out loud, yet everyone felt that something was off, like the air itself had changed. And standing in the middle of that uneasy silence were two of the calmest faces anyone could ever see. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. Unaware that a costly mistake had already been made long before they arrived, the camera team was whispering around the monitors. The director looked tense. The script supervisor kept flipping through notes again and again like she was searching for proof that the world had not just collapsed. Nobody dared to speak loudly because the situation was too fragile. One wrong word and everything could fall apart. The film they were working on was one of the biggest projects of the year. Millions of dollars were already invested. One mistake could destroy not only a scene, but the whole movie. Keanu walked onto the set with his usual calm energy. He greeted the crew, bowed his head slightly with polite respect, and smiled the way only he could, gentle and humble. Sandra arrived shortly after him, warm and friendly as always, asking everyone how they were doing. No one wanted to tell them the truth yet. They both sensed something strange, but no one explained. Then the director walked up to them. His voice was low, almost shaking, trying to sound controlled but failing. He finally said the words that broke the silence. "We may have a serious problem." Right there, the tone of the entire day changed. Sandra stopped smiling. Keanu's expression became focused. He did not panic. He never did. Instead, he simply listened. The director explained that they had discovered a major continuity problem in the footage that had already been filmed. A key emotional scene from last week did not match the scene shot yesterday. The lighting was different, the camera angle was different, and the emotional tone did not align at all. They had already shot other scenes based on that moment. If the mistake stayed, the story of the whole movie would crumble. And if they fixed it by reshooting everything, they would lose time, money, contracts, and maybe even the film itself. The worst part was this: no one knew who caused it. Someone had made a mistake with the main camera lens change. Someone had not followed the continuity notes. Someone had approved the wrong take. One tiny mistake had turned into a huge disaster. A hush fell over the set again. This time it was heavier. The production manager stepped forward and said they had already checked the logs. They believed the mistake was caused by a young assistant camera operator, new to the industry. First major film of his life. Quiet, respectful, always trying hard not to disturb anyone. His name was Liam. Everyone stared at him. The director was ready to fire him. The studio was ready to blacklist him. The entire team was ready to blame him. But Keanu was not. He watched the boy. He saw not guilt, but fear. Not arrogance, but shock. Liam's hands were shaking. He was breathing fast, but he was not defending himself. He looked like someone who already accepted a punishment he did not deserve. That caught Keanu's attention. The director turned to Keanu and said the studio wanted an immediate decision. If they fire the assistant and reshoot everything, the film might barely survive, but it would cost millions. If they don't fix it, the movie will make no sense. Sandra could feel the pressure too. She looked at the assistant, then at the director, then at Keanu. She did not speak, but she was clearly waiting to see how Keanu would respond. Keanu took a slow breath. He did not agree. He did not disagree. He just observed. And then, in his quiet way, he asked one simple question. "Before we blame anyone, did we fully confirm how this happened?" The room froze. His tone was calm, not accusing, not emotional, just thoughtful. But those words changed everything. The director looked confused. The crew exchanged glances. Keanu was not defending the assistant. He was questioning the assumption. Sandra nodded slowly. She knew this side of him well. He never jumped to judgment. He never accepted something just because someone said it. He always looked deeper, always believed in understanding before action. The director tried to explain that time was running out. The studio was calling every hour. They needed a name to blame. They needed someone to sacrifice so production could move on. But Keanu stayed silent for a moment. Then he said something no one expected. "Give me 24 hours before you decide anything." Everyone stared. The director blinked. 24 hours for what? Keanu answered softly. To find the truth. Not the easiest answer. The right one. Those words held weight. No one had the courage to argue. When Keanu spoke like that, it was never ego, never drama. It was clarity. Sandra stepped beside him and said gently, I think he is right. The mistake is huge, but rushing to blame someone might make it worse. We need to know what really happened. The director hesitated. The producers hesitated. The crew stayed silent. Keanu continued, If after 24 hours it is proven his fault, then decide what you want. But if it is not, we cannot destroy someone's life over something we are not sure about. The young assistant looked up slowly. His eyes were red, but a small spark came back into them. No one had stood between him and disaster before. But Keanu just did. Finally, the director nodded. Fine, 24 hours. But if we lose this film, the studio will blame all of us. Keanu accepted that. Calmly. Silently. Respectfully. The tension did not disappear. But something changed. The boy was no longer alone. And everyone now wondered what Keanu was really planning, because no one knew this one truth. Keanu already had a suspicion, and he was going to risk his own name, his own image, and his own position to test it. The film was in danger. A career was hanging by a thread, and the next 24 hours would reveal something no one on set was prepared for, and this was only the beginning. The crew tried to continue working, but the silence on set felt heavier than the lights hanging above them. Everyone was pretending to stay focused, yet every mind was stuck on the same thought. What if the movie really collapsed because of a single mistake no one could undo? What if the studio pulled their funding? What if the assistant really was the one responsible, and they were just delaying the inevitable? But the only person who was not panicking was Keanu. He walked away from the noise and went straight to the editing bay. He wanted to see the footage himself, not the final cuts, not the versions already cleaned up. He wanted the raw files, the untouched video, the truth hidden in the details. The editors were confused when he arrived. Actors rarely entered that room. Actors never reviewed raw footage. But Keanu did not behave like a typical star. He never had. He treated every team member with the same respect he gave directors and producers. So, when he asked to sit down and review the timeline, they made space for him with quiet admiration. The young assistant Liam stood at a distance, unsure whether he should run or stay. He had not spoken a single word since being blamed. His silence had been mistaken for guilt, but Keanu had seen something else. Not guilt, but loyalty. The kind of loyalty that kept someone quiet even when they were being accused. The kind of loyalty that could ruin a life if nobody understood it. Keanu began checking each recorded angle. He watched frame by frame, matching the continuity notes, studying the lighting shifts, the lens transitions, the timing of camera switches. Hours passed. The crew outside continued pretending nothing was wrong. Sandra stayed nearby, not interrupting, but watching with deep curiosity. She knew him well enough to understand that when Keanu went silent like this, he was not confused. He was searching. The editors tried to explain what they believed happened, but Keanu kept asking questions, not to doubt them. But to understand the exact flow of events, he asked which lens was used in which scene. He asked who signed off each take. He even asked about the simple things like who plugged in what cable. Nothing felt too small to matter. And slowly, the truth began to reveal itself. One specific file caught his attention. A scene shot with a different lens than the rest. A lens that required an extra calibration step. A lens that was not supposed to be used in that emotional sequence. And then it clicked. The mistake had not come from the young assistant. It came from a senior crew member. Someone respected, someone untouchable. Someone who had been in the industry for years and never expected to be questioned. And before that mistake was passed along, the assistant had tried to cover for him. Tried to quietly fix it instead of exposing him. He took the blame to protect someone he admired. But there was something even deeper, Keanu noticed. The moment the lens was changed, the assistant started adjusting the stabilizer settings. That meant he was not the one who switched it. He was the one trying to correct someone else's action. He was not the cause. He was the one trying to save the shot. Keanu's eyes softened. He respected loyalty. Especially the kind that expected no reward. Sandra entered the editing room quietly, noticing Keanu staring at the screen without speaking. She approached him and asked gently, "Did you find what you were looking for?" Keanu nodded slowly. "I found something, but not what they expected." She sat beside him. "So the assistant didn't do it?" "No," Keanu answered softly. "Someone else did. Someone higher." And he tried to protect them. He chose silence instead of blaming. Sandra looked at him closely. "Are you going to tell the director?" Keanu did not respond right away. There was a long, thoughtful pause, not dramatic, just real. He was not worried about who made the mistake. He was thinking about the consequences. If he revealed the truth, the real person who caused the damage would face humiliation. The studio might fire them. Their entire career could collapse. And the assistant, the only person who showed real loyalty, would live with guilt for exposing them. And that was when Keanu realized something important. The real problem was not the mistake. It was the way people were ready to destroy someone just to protect the film. They wanted a name to punish, not a solution to save everyone. Keanu stood up. He now had a plan forming in his mind. But it was not a plan that involved blaming anyone. It was something smarter, something kinder, something that might save not only the movie, but 2 different lives at the same time. He turned to Sandra and said, "I think there is a way to fix this without hurting anyone." Sandra narrowed her eyes in thought. "You're not talking about reshooting?" "No," Keanu replied. "I'm talking about rewriting the meaning of the mistake, making it part of the film instead of a flaw." She blinked, stunned. "You want to turn the accident into a story element?" "Yes," he said. "If we reshoot, we lose money and time. If we blame someone, we lose trust. But if we use the mistake creatively, it becomes a moment of brilliance instead of disaster." Sandra smiled slowly, in a soft way only she could. "Only you could think like that." Keanu did not smile back. Not yet. There was still too much at stake. He walked out of the editing room and went straight to find the young assistant. Liam was standing outside the studio near the equipment crates, alone, thinking his career was already over. When he saw Keanu walking toward him, he froze. Keanu spoke gently. "I know you did not make the mistake." Liam's eyes widened. He could not speak. No one had believed him before. No one had even asked. But Keanu had. "I also know why you stayed quiet," Keanu continued. "You were trying to protect someone else," Liam trembled. "I did not want him to get blamed. He has been my mentor. He trusted me. I could not let him be humiliated." Keanu nodded with deep respect. "Loyalty is a rare thing, and you showed it even when it meant losing everything." The boy looked down, eyes filling with tears he tried to hide. No one had ever called his silence a strength before. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder, not as a star to an assistant, but as a human to another human. "I am going to fix this," Keanu said slowly. "But you have to let me do it my way. No blame, no shame, no ruined careers." Liam stared at him, speechless. Keanu's voice stayed steady. "The world will never know what happened. But I will. And I will not forget what you did." For the first time since the disaster began, the assistant could breathe. Still, one question remained in his voice. "But how will you fix it?" Keanu looked back at Sandra, who was watching from a distance, and he said the words that would change everything. "I will not erase the mistake. I will turn it into the strongest moment in the film." That was the moment when silence was no longer fear. It became possibility. And from that single decision, a chain reaction would begin. One that would shock every person on the set. One that would transform a disaster into brilliance. And one that would teach everyone there that kindness is not weakness, and intelligence is not loud. The countdown had started. 24 hours were passing fast. The future of the film, the reputation of a senior artist, and the career of a young assistant now rested in the hands of the only actor brave enough to protect both truth and dignity at the same time. And this was just the second step of the journey. The next morning felt heavier than the one before. Instead of panic, there was something even more unsettling in the air. People were quiet not because they were afraid of the mistake, but because they were now waiting for Keanu's next move. They did not know what he was planning. They only knew he had asked for 24 hours, and those hours were slipping away fast. The director arrived early, already stressed from late-night calls with the studio. Every word he heard from them was a reminder that the future of the film was now a ticking clock. The producers wanted answers. The investors wanted control. The studio wanted someone to blame. And the crew wanted to know if the film they were pouring their lives into was already doomed. But Keanu walked in calm, as if he was stepping into a peaceful space instead of a storm. Sandra followed close behind him, and her presence brought a quiet strength to the room. Together they looked like two people who were not afraid of the situation, but instead quietly shaping it. The director approached them with impatience, wrapped in concern. "Keanu, we need to decide. We cannot wait any longer. I have to send a report to the studio. Are we reshooting or not?" Keanu did not rush to answer. He first asked a gentle question. "Can you gather the main creative team here in 10 minutes? Editor, cinematographer, script supervisor, sound and lighting head, and the assistant, Liam." The director hesitated. He did not know what Keanu was planning. But something in Keanu's voice carried a calm authority that made it impossible to refuse. Soon, the key members of the team were inside the screening room. The atmosphere was tense. Liam stood in the corner again, trying not to be seen, unsure whether this meeting would end his career or save it. The senior cinematographer, the real cause of the mistake, walked in confidently, not realizing yet that the truth had already been discovered. Keanu stood in front of the group, not as a star, not as someone above them, but as one of them. Equal, respectful, collected. "Before we discuss solutions," he said softly, "I want to show you something." He asked the editor to play the two scenes back to back. The original emotional scene from last week, followed by the misaligned scene from yesterday. Everyone in the room could see the difference immediately. Different tone, different lens depth, different emotional rhythm. The mistake was obvious, and the damage was real. But then Keanu asked the editor to play the scene again, this time with something extra, a new idea. Instead of cutting the two scenes as a single flow, he suggested placing a transition in the middle, a shift in the character's emotional state, a change in perspective, something that made the difference in lens feel intentional, not wrong. Suddenly, what looked like a mistake now looked like a dramatic turning point in the story. The crew watched in silence, stunned. The scene no longer felt broken. It felt richer, deeper, filled with purpose. Keanu spoke slowly so that everyone could feel the meaning behind his words. "We don't need to erase the mistake. We need to transform it into a moment that makes the story stronger." The director stared, wide-eyed. The editor leaned closer. Sandra smiled quietly because she had already seen this possibility in his mind. But the cinematographer, the man who made the real technical error, shifted uncomfortably. He was smart enough to understand what was happening. Keanu was giving him a way to walk out clean. No exposure, no humiliation, no blame. But there was a deeper layer to Keanu's plan that no one else understood. He was not just saving the film, he was saving people. The director finally spoke. "Keanu, are you saying we can actually keep this and not reshoot anything?" Keanu nodded. "Yes, instead of fighting the difference, we use it. We make it intentional. The audience won't see it as a problem. They will see it as a story choice." The room fell silent again, but this silence was different from the one before. It was no longer fear. It was realization, awe, respect. Then the script supervisor raised a question. "But we already built later scenes based on the continuity of the original version. If we change this emotional beat, will it affect the storytelling ahead?" Keanu nodded again, already prepared. "It will, but only in a good way. This change actually gives the lead character more emotional depth. It turns confusion into growth, weakness into discovery. It makes the journey more human," Sandra added softly. "It makes the character break on screen for the first time, and that break becomes the reason he rises again later. It will hit the audience harder." The director slowly sank into the chair. He was not just relieved. He was amazed. "You just saved us millions of dollars." Keanu did not smile with pride. Instead, he spoke softly, almost like a reminder. "I did not do this for the money. I did it because creative work should not become a battlefield of blame. It should be a place where we protect each other and build something beautiful together." Those words hit the room deeply, because every person there knew how rare it was to hear them. But then came the moment Keanu had been waiting for. He looked at Liam, the assistant who had been silently holding his breath. Convinced his life was still over, Keanu said gently. I know you stayed quiet to protect someone. I know you did not cause this problem, and I know you tried to fix it. I respect that more than anything. Liam's eyes filled again, but this time it was not fear. It was release. And then Keanu did something even more shocking. He turned to the cinematographer, the senior expert who had actually made the mistake, and said in the most respectful tone possible, I also know who changed the lens, but I do not want him blamed either, because we all make mistakes. The question is not who is guilty. The question is who is willing to protect others when things go wrong. The cinematographer's face changed slowly. He was a proud man, respected for years, and now Keanu was giving him something far more valuable than protection, a chance to keep his dignity without being exposed. There was no anger in Keanu's voice. No judgment, just deep understanding that every human is fragile under pressure. The cinematographer lowered his head slightly. He did not speak. But his silence this time was not guilt. It was gratitude. Keanu's final words to the room were simple. We fix the scene. We protect each other, and no one leaves harmed. The decision was made. The room was united. The disaster was no longer a disaster. The crew walked out with a new sense of purpose. The film had been saved without sacrifice. Only one person stayed behind. Liam. He stood in front of Keanu, whispering the only words he had the strength to say. Why did you help me? Keanu looked at him with the kind of softness only truth can carry. Because you were ready to lose your future to save someone else. And people like that deserve another chance. The assistant covered his face, not out of shame but out of relief. This time his silence was not because he was alone. It was because kindness had left him without words. Sandra watched the moment from the doorway. She knew many actors could perform kindness on camera, but only a few lived it in real life. She smiled to herself and thought, this is why people love him. Not because he is perfect, but because he protects people quietly without needing applause. The decision had been made. The reshoot was canceled. The scene would be reinvented. The film was safe, but there was still one more twist no one saw coming. The studio had not yet approved the new plan, and one powerful executive was already on his way to the set to shut everything down. And when he arrived, the real test of Keanu's plan would begin. The meeting room was quiet again, but not with fear this time. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when people are still unsure if the sky is clear or just pretending to be. The team was ready to move forward with Keanu's plan, but there was one final wall they had not crossed yet, and it was coming straight toward them. The studio had sent someone, not a messenger, not a coordinator, not a polite representative. They had sent the man who made final decisions when money was at risk. The kind of man who believed that human mistakes were less important than profit charts. The kind of man who looked at films not as art, but as investments. His name was Mr. Haldren. No one liked him. No one disrespected him either because he had the power to shut down a film with a single phone call. His arrival was not just a meeting. It was Judgment Day. Sandra heard the news while she was reviewing her lines with Keanu. The assistant director came to them with a pale face and whispered, He just arrived. He wants a full report. He is asking who is responsible for the mistake. Keanu closed the script slowly. He knew what this meant. The studio did not care about guilt or innocence. They cared about financial loss. They cared about headlines. They cared about control. And the first person they would try to remove was the assistant. Not because he was guilty, but because he was the easiest one to sacrifice. Liam heard the news too. His hands shook again. He already knew what people like Mr. Haldren did to people like him. He would not just lose his job. He would lose his future. The crew started whispering again, the same way they had before. The fear had returned, except this time it had a face and a name. Keanu stood up. He did not speak loudly, but when he said, "We are not letting him fire anyone," it was not a request. Sandra watched him with quiet pride. She had seen him play roles of strength on screen, but this was different. This was not acting. This was who he truly was. Before they entered the meeting room, Keanu pulled Liam aside. He looked straight into his eyes and said, "No matter what happens in there, stay calm. Do not panic. Do not confess anything. Just let me speak." Liam nodded, but his voice was still trembling. "What if they do not listen to you?" Keanu placed one hand on his shoulder. "They will." It was not confidence. It was certainty. The meeting room door opened. Mr. Haldren sat at the head of the table. Sharp suit, cold eyes, zero emotion. He did not greet anyone. He simply said, "Tell me what happened and tell me who made the mistake." The director began to explain, but before he could go far, Mr. Haldren interrupted. "I did not ask for excuses. I asked for accountability. The studio is not paying millions to hear speeches." His words were like ice. He did not care who suffered. Someone had to be punished, and he wanted a name. Keanu remained silent until the moment was right. Then he turned to the executive and said calmly, "Before we talk about blame, we need to show you the solution." Mr. Haldren looked at him, not impressed. "I did not ask for your opinion. I asked for the truth. Did someone ruin the continuity of the scene or not?" Keanu nodded. "Yes, a mistake happened, but it is already fixed." Haldren stared at him with disbelief. "Fixed how? You cannot rewrite physics. You either shot it wrong or you did not." Keanu did not argue. He walked to the screen, signaled the editor, and said, "Play the two versions." The original mistake played first. The broken flow, the visual mismatch, the wrong lens. Then came Keanu's edited version, reshaped, reframed, restructured into something powerful. When the scene ended, the room was silent. Even Mr. Haldren's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in reluctant interest. Keanu spoke softly, but every word carried purpose. "We do not need reshoots. We do not need to waste studio money. We do not need to fire anyone. The mistake is not a failure anymore. It is now one of the most emotional turning points of the film." Sandra stepped in, her voice warm but steady. "We did not just save the film. We made it better." Mr. Haldren leaned back. And who is responsible for the mistake? There it was again. The question he cared about most. The name he wanted. The sacrifice he needed to feel in control. Keanu looked straight at him. "No one is being blamed, because the problem is gone. And the film is safe." Haldren's face hardened. "That is not how this works. Someone has to be held responsible. Someone must answer for the loss of time and money." Keanu did not blink. "You are asking to punish a person for something that is no longer a problem." Haldren leaned forward, voice sharper. "Yes, that is exactly how business works. And this was the moment when the real test began. Keanu did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He simply told the truth. The assistant you want to fire did not make the mistake. He tried to protect someone else. He stayed silent not out of fear, but loyalty. And loyalty is rare in this industry. It should not be punished. It should be protected." That statement hit the room like a soft earthquake. Liam's eyes widened. The cinematographer lowered his head. Sandra watched in absolute stillness. But Mr. Haldren was not impressed. He looked at Keanu and said coldly, "You are not the one who decides who stays or who goes." Keanu replied with calm strength, "No, but I am the one who decides whether I continue this film under a system that destroys people who try to do the right thing." The room froze. Even the director looked shocked. Mr. Haldren's expression changed just slightly. Not fear, not anger, but calculation. He had not expected Keanu to use himself as leverage. Keanu continued, his voice firm but respectful. "If you fire that assistant, I walk away from this film. And without me, the studio loses more than money. It loses trust, audience support, and public respect." The room filled with a silence so heavy it almost echoed. Keanu was not threatening. He was stating a fact. Because everyone knew one thing. Keanu Reeves was not replaceable. He had never used his name for power before. But today, he was using it to protect someone who could not defend himself. Sandra finally spoke, backing him with quiet strength. "If Keanu walks, I walk too." The director stared. The editor froze. The producers exchanged glances. Mr. Haldren realized he was not facing actors. He was facing people who valued integrity more than contracts, and for the first time, the studio executive had no comeback. Keanu stepped closer and said one final sentence that left no space for argument. If this film is going to stand for anything, it should stand for respect, not fear. Mr. Haldren did not respond right away. He stared at Keanu, then at Sandra, then at the assistant. Finally, with a stiff voice, he said, "Fine, no one gets fired. But this decision is on you." Keanu nodded. "Yes, and I accept that." Haldren stood up, gathered his folder, and left without another word. The room exhaled all at once. The danger was gone. The assistant was safe. The crew was safe. The film was safe. Keanu had won, not with anger, not with force, but with quiet strength. As the door closed behind Haldren, Liam looked at Keanu with eyes full of disbelief. "You were willing to risk your whole career for me." Keanu smiled softly. "A career means nothing if you cannot use it to protect something good." The boy could not reply. Tears finally fell, but this time nobody looked away, not even the cinematographer. Sandra placed her hand on Keanu's arm and whispered, "You just changed more than a scene. You changed the way people work together." But Keanu only said one thing: "We are not done yet. Now we have to make the new version of the scene perfect." And that was the truth. He had saved the film from being destroyed, but now he had to prove that the rewritten moment was not just a rescue. It had to become the most unforgettable part of the movie. The real magic was about to begin. The mood on set changed completely after the meeting. It was no longer about fear. It was about proving something. Now every person there wanted the same thing Keanu wanted: to turn the accident into the strongest scene in the movie. Keanu spent the next hours working with the director, the editor, and the cinematographer, not as a star giving orders, but as a teammate helping shape a story. Sandra stayed close, offering ideas, helping adjust emotional beats, and lifting the energy of everyone around her. The assistant Liam watched quietly, still processing what had happened. He was safe yet shocked. No one had ever defended him like that. And now, instead of being blamed, he was being included. Keanu even invited him to sit beside the editor to learn the process, as if to remind him that he still belonged there. When they rehearsed the rewritten scene, something unexpected happened. The emotional shift caused by the lens mistake created a deeper truth between the characters. Sandra noticed it first. She said, "This scene feels more real now, like the character is breaking inside for the first time." Keanu nodded. The mistake made the moment human. We just had to see it differently. The director watched the monitor and said, "This is better than the original version, stronger, more painful, more alive." Even the cinematographer, the man who caused the accident, finally spoke. "I have been in this industry for 30 years, he said quietly, "and this is the first time someone saved my reputation without even mentioning my name. I will not forget that." Keanu simply answered, "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we build after them." By the end of the day, the new scene was locked. No reshoot, no extra cost, no lost time, but something far more valuable had been created: respect. The crew no longer looked at Keanu as a star. They looked at him as the kind of leader the industry needed, someone who protected people, not power. Before leaving set, Sandra stood beside Keanu and said softly, "You did not just fix a scene. You taught everyone here a lesson without giving a speech." Keanu smiled a little. "Lessons are stronger when people feel them, not when they are told." As he walked away, Liam called out to him, voice steady for the first time, "Keanu, one day I will do for someone what you did for me." Keanu turned back, eyes warm. That is how goodness travels, one person to the next. He walked out, calm as always, but he had no idea that the scene he just saved would become the most talked-about moment in the final movie, and the audience would feel something powerful without ever knowing the story behind it. The disaster had turned into art, and the art was built on kindness. Weeks passed, and the film slowly moved from shooting to editing, from editing to polishing, and from polishing to the final cut that would be sent to theaters. The mistake that once threatened to destroy everything was now invisible to everyone except the people who had lived through it. What was once fear had become pride. What was once a problem had become the very heart of the story. When the cast and crew gathered to watch the first full screening of the completed film, the room felt different. Nobody was tense anymore. They were excited, but more than that, they were connected. They had been through something together, something that had changed them without needing to be spoken about. Sandra sat beside Keanu, both quiet as the lights dimmed. The film played, scene after scene flowed beautifully. And then it arrived, the scene that had once been broken. The one everyone had argued over, the one that almost ruined the movie. The audience inside the screening room did not see a mistake. They saw a turning point. They felt the emotional shift. They reacted exactly the way Keanu had imagined. Silent, moved, holding their breath without knowing why. The director stared at the screen in awe, whispering, "This scene carries the soul of the whole film." The editor nodded. "It feels like the character is wounded here for the first time, and the audience falls in love with him because of it." Liam watched from the back row, and for the first time, he was not afraid to look at the screen. What used to be his nightmare was now his proof that he belonged in the industry. When the credits rolled, the room filled with applause, not for the actors alone, but for the film itself, because the story behind it had become part of its spirit. After the screening, the producers approached Keanu and Sandra. They did not talk about budgets or schedules. They talked about the scene. "The studio thinks that moment will become the emotional signature of the whole movie," one of them said. Keanu smiled softly. "Good. Then it means we made the right choice." But there was still one more reveal left. One that had nothing to do with the scene, the studio, or the audience. It was personal. As everyone slowly left the room, Liam walked up to Keanu. He was not nervous anymore. He stood with quiet strength, the kind that comes from surviving something and learning from it. "I wanted to say something before the film is released," he said. Keanu looked at him, listening as always. "I never told you why I stayed quiet that day," Liam continued. "It was not just loyalty. It was because the cinematographer once helped me when I first joined the team. He trained me without treating me like a nobody. I thought I owed him something. I could not let him fall." Keanu nodded. "You were trying to repay kindness with kindness." Liam smiled, a small, tired smile. "Yes, and I thought that silence was the only way. But you showed me something else. Kindness can speak too, and it can save people without hurting anyone." Keanu rested a hand on his shoulder again. "Then promise me something. One day when you see someone younger than you make a mistake, protect them the way you wanted to protect him, and not with silence. With courage." Liam nodded. "I promise." He walked away, not as an assistant who almost got fired, but as someone who now knew what kind of professional he wanted to become. Days later, the film was released worldwide. Audiences loved it. Critics praised the emotional power of the exact scene that once threatened to destroy everything. Fans discussed it online, saying it felt raw and human, the turning point of the whole story. No one knew the truth behind it. No one knew the risk. No one knew the blame that never happened. But inside the crew, a new kind of respect lived. Not written in credits, not printed in headlines, but remembered in actions. The cinematographer began mentoring new assistants with more patience than ever before. The director learned that sometimes art is not about control, but trust. The editor understood that mistakes are not always broken pieces. Sometimes they are hidden doors. And Liam, the boy who almost lost everything, got promoted. Not because he was lucky, but because someone believed that loyalty was worth saving. As for Keanu, he never mentioned the incident again. He never told an interview, never took credit, because the moment was not about proving he was a hero. It was about protecting the kind of goodness that never asks for applause. Sandra, however, understood it deeply. One evening after the final press tour, she looked at him and said with quiet admiration, "You did something people will feel, even if they never know it happened." Keanu simply answered, "That is the best kind of impact." The film went on to become a success, not just because of its story, but because of the story behind it, a story built on loyalty, protection, and the silent strength of doing the right thing even when no one is watching. And that is how a costly mistake that was supposed to ruin everything became the moment that changed everyone involved.